Hello and welcome to another episode of my Duelist Cup series, and in this episode I want to go over replays where I had to go second against the top 700 global. The replays from this episode are from the second day, where I finished with 24,800 Duelist points, and with 24,800 Duelist points I was temporarily in the top 700 global. That means the opponents played against should also be really skilled opponents, really high level players with solid decks. And if you want to become top 700 global, subscribe to my channel. And now let's see how Tearlaments performs against the top 700 global going second. Here we are in the first replay, and as I mentioned I had to go second because my opponent won a coin toss. But my opening hand looks pretty decent for going second, so I have Race Off, Scream, FBG, Rota and Clown. My opponent starts with Ariana grabbing the Chandelier, so it's Labrynth, and then Chandelier discard Nibiru to set the big welcome directly from the deck. Alright. And then set free pass, so complete normal turn 1 combo for Labrynth. And here I start with the Race Off, trying to grab the Fenrir and then Fenrir into Tier Cache. Special summon Fenrir, but then my opponent hits me with the Rumor Cannon on the Fenrir, which is a misplay in my opinion, because at this elo range you should expect Tearlaments, which is much more common than pure Cache. The Rumor on Fenrir would be a good play if you play against pure Cache, but Tearlaments has just so many extenders that can push through the Rumor on Fenrir, and you should hold the Rumor as long as possible. So Foolish Pearl Goods in the 3v Karma, and the 3v Karma grabbing the Pearl Rhino. And then Pearl into Sharon, and now Scream. Chaining 1 Scream, chaining 2 Rhino Heart, because I want to have the 500 debuff on the Lovely in case my opponent summons Lovely this turn. And if I'm able to access my Tier Cache, then Tier Cache could attack over the Lovely under the Pearl Rhino attack boost. But my opponent hits me with a deep barrier on the Huffness effect, which is really unfortunate. Now I cannot fusion summon this turn, and I can also not trigger the Pearl Rhino to pop. But I can set up a redraw during my opponent's turn by going Sharon, discarding a Trick Clown. And I have 2 level 4 bodies, but before I want to set up a redraw, Battle Phase, trying to force out the Big Welcome by attacking into the Ariana. So my opponent decides to activate Big Welcome, bounce the Ariana, summon Lovely, and then Lovely gets the pop. Chandelier trying to add back, and here is where I decide to use a Keldo, because I want to prevent the Chandelier add back, and I also want to get rid of the Big Welcome in the graveyard. Otherwise the Big Welcome could become a bounce. Lovely popping the Pearl Rhino, which is in my opinion the correct play. But I can still go into Redoer, and then Redoer could make a fusion summon during my opponent's turn. But here my opponent makes a really strong play. In a draw phase, shotgunning input on the Redoer. And Lovely says I cannot respond to trap effects with monster effects, so I cannot chain a Redoer here, and Redoer gets negated by the imperm. And then normal summon Ariana, chaining 1 Ariana, chaining 2 Scream. Maybe I can hit a Sharon here and still get to a fusion summon. No, I just hit the Strudo, Crime and Rhino Heart. But the Strudo in the graveyard is also pretty solid for the next turn in case I get deburied again. And my opponent resets the debury with the Lovely and then attacks over the Rhino Heart. Alright. And now Chandelier, setting a new Big Welcome Labyrinth. And then during the draw phase of my turn, immediately shotgunning the Big Welcome to summon Ariane. Alright. So Lovely, Ariane, and here is where I chain a Redoer, because I don't want my Redoer to get popped by the Lovely. So taking out with the Redoer, and the Chandelier add back, and then Ariane, into Ariana, and then popping the Fenrir, perfectly reasonable decision here, but I get to summon back the Clown and also Sharon, and now my opponent is basically forced to chain a Deberry calling fusion. But the game is not over, because I have a game plan even under Dimensional Barrier calling fusion, as you're going to see right now. So Clown comes back, and then I normal summon the Sharon, which also gives me 3 Scream Mills. And I hit the Fairy Tale Snow and Modora. So 2 great mills here, but my plan would also work if I don't mill the Snow here. Here I go to Strudo, my opponent chains Kuklok and then Chandelier, but it doesn't matter because the only thing my opponent could set is Welcome, and Welcome won't stop my OTK this turn. And now it's time to punish my opponent for calling fusion with the D barrier. But first of all, summoning Snow a second time. And then with Snow and Chariot we go into the Garrus. And now, the Garrus effect to double the attack. And then Battle Phase. And Punisher Pump up. Declaring attack unlovely, my opponent goes for welcome. But this doesn't matter, this won't stop lethal. My opponent is just trying to stall time and make me lose the timeout, but I won't lose the timeout. Because I already declared my lethal attack. And I just continue with my lethal attack. BAM! 10k battle damage. And my opponent got completely destroyed after D-Barrier calling fusions. And this is how you can win through a D-Barrier going second. And here we are in the next game, but I have to make a disclaimer. This replay was against someone in the top 2000 global and not top 700. Bruh. And the difference between top 700 and top 2000 is insane. So absolutely no comparison. My opponent starts with normal summon Ash Blossom and then Infernoble Arms Surrender, grabbing the Fireflint Lady. Alright. And then special summon the Gearfried, and then Fireflint Lady, so it seems to be Infernoble, which is really interesting, because Infernoble is more like a rogue deck that loses really hard against Maxi, and I wouldn't expect the best players global to bring Infernoble to the Duelist Cup. But this player seems to be really confident with the Infernoble strategy. So we go Assault into Overgear, and then Gearblade adding back. Let's see how hard my opponent can combo with one Assault. We go Assault and Ash into Promethean Princess. Very interesting line. I haven't seen this in TCG yet, because in TCG Assault got banned before Promethean Princess got released. And here Promethean Princess, reborn to level 1. And with those two we go into Angelica. And then Angelica, search the museum. And then probably a completely normal Infernoble combo from this point. So museum, grabbing another Noble Arms. And then Gearblade, equip. Angelica take out to summon the Roland from the extra deck. So Roland here. And then Turpin. And then adding back the Gearfried, but the Gearfried was already summoned this turn. So my opponent will be unable to add the Gearfried to the end board. And then Charles here. And then equipping the Charles. And our opponent can go into the Link 1. But first of all, popping the Promethean Princess. Really interesting play. That means my opponent won't attempt to link line with the Promethean Princess into a potential Link 4. Instead we go Charles the Great here, and then equipping the Emperor Charles. And then Museum to special summon back the Emperor Charles. And then with those two buddies we go into the Flame Swordsman Link 2. Really interesting play. I did not expect that. I expected something like a Baron de Fleur here. But now Angelica comes back and my opponent is able to equip Angelica's ring. And then shotgunning the Maxi. Maxi is a little bit rough because my opponent could top deck into hand traps and I still have to play through a couple negates. And for this reason I start with Scream. My opponent is so friendly and negates the Scream for me. That means now I get the Scream Graveyard effect, and the Scream Graveyard effect should be able to bait out Angelica's ring. So we already dealt with 2 spell negates. Let's see what my opponent has left. I start with the normal summon Rhinoheart. Gets ashed. Sure, still no problem at all because I have Grief as an extender. So Grief chaining 1. And then Forbidden Droplet. And Droplet can send the Clown from my hand to negate all 3 monsters on my opponent's side. And now the chain resolves, I negate everything. I get to resolve the Grief. So Grief send Harvest to the graveyard. And then in a new chain, Harvest chaining 1, Clown chaining 2. And now we go into get Carlos. And hit Carlos into Tier Cache. And Tearkash mills Mudora Trivikama, which is absolutely amazing. So Trivikama, searching for Pearl Rhino. And then Mudora, shuffling back the Promethean Princess and the Infernobles that could have graveyard effects. And now, after removing the Promethean Princess, it's time to combo. So Pearl Rhino, grabbing the Sharon, and I get to mill 5 with the key colors, 3 with the Tearkash, and I hit a Sharon. Alright. And now we can go into Rue colors. And then Pearl Rhino on Angelica. But Angelica is already negated by droplets, so I cannot negate the effect with Rue colors here. So a small miscalculation on my part, but it shouldn't matter that much because I have still this Trudeau. And with this Trudeau I can go for game here. So we go into Deep Sea Prima Donna. And then my opponent dropped a Nibiru here, which is a misplay in my opinion. Because I can negate it with Rue colors and my opponent should have waited after I summoned with the Deep Sea Prima Donna. Because then my opponent has a higher chance of having Nibiru and Veiler combined. But as I mentioned earlier, this player is only top 2000 global and not top 700, so a little bit weaker than the other players in this video. I go Prima Donna into Seamore and adding back the Banished Turban. And now we go into End Punisher. And now it's time to punish the opponent for misplaying. Baron discard Rhinoheart. And with all of those bodies I should be close to lethal. And my opponent's scoop, where we completely crushed Infernoble going second through an end board with a bunch of negates. And here we are in the next game. My opponent won the coin toss, so was able to go first, and starts with a Bonfire. So Bonfire into Snake Eye Ash. And then Ash into Poplar, and then Poplar into OSS. And I should probably speed up the Fire King combo a little bit here. So OSS into Polynix, and then Polynix into Sanctuary, into Island. And then Garonix, probably Ulcanix from deck, interesting line. And then Zombie Vampire. Milling 4 cards from my deck, but milling 4 cards from a Tearlaments deck is the worst thing you could do. My opponent has to special summon the Sharon, otherwise I could trigger the Sharon effect in the graveyard. I still get to summon the Clown. My opponent gets the wanted poster draw and then has to go SP Little Knight, banishing my Clown. And now my opponent has no longer IP into SP during my turn, which makes the endboard of the opponent a little bit weaker, depending on the line that my opponent could go for from this position. So Dire Belster, resetting the OSS, but it's just follow up at this point. And then Flame Witch Dragon. Then the Sunlight Wolf. Interesting zone placement, but then my opponent goes into Promethean Princess, and then Promethean Princess resummon the Sunlight Wolf. Adding back the Ash Blossom. Okay, really strong play. Also tells me my opponent could have the Kirin already in the hand. I start with the Trivikama, trying to bait out the Ash Blossom. No Ash Blossom on Trivikama. Pearl Rhino. No Ash Blossom on Pearl Rhino. And then Scream. And then normal summon Rhinoheart. Rhinoheart chaining 1, Scream chaining 2. The threat is, if Scream resolves, the Appaloosa from the opponent gets 500 debuff and loses 1 negate. And my opponent decides to not Ash the Scream, instead Veilers the Rhinoheart. Which is also kinda fine, but I mill a Sullic and a Scream here. And the fact my opponent dropped an effect Veiler means I can go for the talents here. So 2 free searches from the Scream mill 3. And then talents, taking the Apo from my opponent and using the Apo as a weapon against the opponent. And now my opponent should be completely crushed. So taking the Appaloosa here, and then Ambler Whale 1, Garonix 2. Sure, I can just negate the Garonix with the Appaloosa that I just stole from the opponent. SP Little Knight comes back, but SP just trades with 1 Appaloosa negate. Sharon here, disconnect the Hafness, and then Hafness to go into Kid Carlos, also Heartbeat to add back. And then Promethean Princess here. I could use the Apollousa on Princess or on Akiri, but I think it's better to use the Apo on the Princess. So no Princess for my opponent. And then we make it Carlos here. Pearl Rhino forcing out the SP. My opponent has to chain the SP on Kid Carlos. But this won't be enough because I have so much gas going on. So Kid Carlos searching the Hafness. And then we go into Tier Cache, milling 3 cards. I hear the snow here, but my plan was to go for the Strudo first. And then my opponent scooped. And we completely destroyed Snake Eye Fire King going second against the top 700 global. Also, this opponent had the silver in the logo. That means this opponent was top 100 global in one of the previous Duelist Cups. So we destroyed a top 100 global going second with Tearlaments. Anyways, here we are in the next game. And I had to go second again. My opening hand looks kinda decent, but I'm playing against 51 card and 51 card could be a really scary combo pile. My opponent starts with a Nightmare Drone, which is already really scary because if the deck is pure Yubel, then the pure Yubel endboard is nearly unbreakable, even if I have a breaker like Droplet. But then my opponent goes for Spright Blue and now I'm a little bit relieved, because it seems to be Yubel Spright and not pure Yubel. And the Spright endboard is actually much weaker compared to the pure Yubel endboard. So Dark Reckoning Beast into some Sarah D Lotus. So it might be a Spright Yubel with a heavier Yubel package. My opponent goes into Cross Sheep. And then Phantom. And then Spright Sprint. Sending the Black Spreader Zombie. Interesting. And then we go into Gigantic Spright. Let's see if I get Illy locked here. Alright, no Illy lock, instead Jet grabbing the double cross. And now Elf, so Elf revived Jet, and then Spirit Gates, resummon the Dark Reckoning Beast, and then IP Masquerina. Alright, so even though it's not a Yubel endboard, this endboard is still extremely sick. We have IP, Elf, Carrot, Phantom, Nightmare Pain, Double Cross, so a bunch of negates and follow up. I start with the Fenrir, my opponent goes for the SP, and I chain Forbidden Droplet. But my opponent makes a really strong play here of chaining Double Cross, so Double Cross will get rid of my Fenrir, and then chaining the Elf in response to the Double Cross. Now Elf will resolve and Elf will provide my opponent with follow up, even though I use Forbidden Droplet sending a monster. But Forbidden Droplet did still a solid job. Now I negate the IP and the Carrot, and I have talents for the Phantom. Searching a Honest for the Spright deck, which is kinda interesting but also rough to play through. Because if I want to force out any of those interruptions during the battle phase, my opponent could just drop the Pixies and then increase the attack. And then I get hit with a draw on the Rhinoheart add from the Road R. Sure, but I can still go Rhinoheart and get Carlos, and Carlos can send the Tier Cache. And as long as I can mill my cards, I should be fine, even though I miss a couple important searches from my milled cards. And now get Carlos 1, Tier Cache 2, milling 8 cards in total. Let's see what I hit. So I hit Sharon, Scream and Trivikama, but Trivikama and Scream are useless because I am on a draw right now. But I can still go into Rukalos. And now I have to play through the board of my opponent while keeping the Spright Pixies in mind. First of all, SP Banish Gigantic, which is the strongest piece of follow-up on my opponent's side. And then SP into Spright Elf, no Pixies yet. And then Rukalos into blue. And here is where opponent decides to drop the Pixies. So I lose the Rukalos, but I can just summon Fairy Tale Snow. And then Snow can book the blue and reset the attack buff. And now Snow attacking into blue, clearing the blue. And in the main phase 2 I can overlay a Sky Crisis Typhoon over my Fairy Tale Snow, which is bigger than SP Little Knight. And then Sky Crisis spawns the IP Masquerina. That means my opponent won't be able to make SP during the next turn. And now my opponent has to play against my SP Banish and my Graveyard Shuffle and the Fairy Tale Snow. And I chain the SP Little Knight to prevent the opponent from summoning their own Typhoon, and the Mudora, shuffling back all possible special summons from the Spirit Gate. And now my opponent should be left on nothing. In end phase, Carrot and SP come back, but I have the 3V Karma in my graveyard. And now it's my turn and I can finally use the 3V Karma in the graveyard. So searching either the Pearl Rhino or Grief, both of them should be lethal from this position. I searched the Pearl Rhino and my opponent scooped. And I think that was a great showcase for breaking bots going second against Spright Yubel. But this replay was from a Saturday morning where I was just 900 global and not top 700 global. But I think top 900 global should be still pretty decent. And here we are in the next game. And here my opponent starts with Nightmare Throne again. Which is really scary because in case it's pure Yubel, then the end bot is absolutely disgusting. My opponent goes for the Spirit of Yubel and the Nightmare Pain. And with just one Samsara D Lotus, my opponent could go for the full end bot with Appaloosa, Rage, Phantom, Nightmare Pain, Escape. So many interruptions, and it's also extremely rough to play through this board because the interruptions are layered and one single Forbidden Droplet won't break everything at once. So Nightmare Pain, popping the Spirit here to search a Grave Skirmer. And then popping the Yubel to special summon Terra Incarnate. And then Yama here. And I honestly think they should hit the Phantom of Yubel to 1. Because centering this deck is literally impossible. Even if I have Veiler here, my opponent could just negate the Veiler with Phantom and then set up another Phantom in the end board. This deck is absolutely disgusting going first if it has access to more than one Phantom. So Nightmare Throne here and then Spirit of Yubel. And then Rage and Shavara to set the Escape. And now Gigantic Sprite. My opponent probably wants to go for the Ibli-Lock, and in my opinion the Ibli-Lock is completely win more and makes the entire deck even worse because you have one additional brick in the main deck and one wasted extra deck slot. That could be another link that is better going second than Gigantic Sprite. Anyways, my opponent goes for Elf, which is a reasonable card in extra deck even without Ibli-Lock, and then Elf into Rage, and then using the second Phantom as a link material to go into IP Masquerena. Alright. So let's see how I could deal with this end board. And by the way, I'm not sure if I had the Link Rebo in the extra deck here. And I think the end board loses even harder to Forbidden Droplet because the opponent gives me one free card to send. So I go for the Razor first, then Rotar, and then Forbidden Droplet, sending Razor, Rotar and Ibli to negate 3 cards on the opponent's side. My opponent could chain Escape, but that would make the end board even worse. And then dropping the Fenrir. Let's see if my opponent wants to respond to the Fenrir. Alright, so no response on Fenrir. Now I can go normal summon Rhinoheart under Scream. Scream chaining 1, Rhinoheart chaining 2. Escape popping Scream, which prevents mill 3. Not sure if I would agree with that play. Anyways, I can send Havness and then chainlock the Havness against the Bell in case the opponent is on Bell. My opponent also gets to trigger Yama, and now Yama can reset the Rage. But Rage into SP should be the only interruptions remaining on my opponent's board right now. I go for Kid Carlos here, and now I have also an opportunity to use the Fenrir Banish. So Fenrir banishing Nightmare Pain just in case my opponent has a Spirit of Yubel in the hand. And Kid Carlos gets Ash. Maybe I should have Shamelocked the other way around. Yeah, I think I should have Shamelocked the other way around. Also, there was no reason for me to use the Fenrir on Rage because it was kinda expected my opponent goes for Rage at some point. And then if I target the rage, my opponent could just chain the rage. My opponent goes for rage, removing my Fenrir, and then SP Little Knight, banishing Kid Carlos. I go Tear Cache here, banishing the Scream in my graveyard, and then milling free with Tear Cache. My opponent chains SP Little Knight. Sure. But the thing is, I have this Druid in my hand. And now my opponent should have one card in a banish pile. I think my opponent had already the Yama in the banish pile. But now if I hit a Clown, which I did here, I can go for the Private on the line and then OTK the opponent with End Punisher, assuming the last card in my opponent's hand isn't real. And then Sharon, discard this Trudeau, milling 3 cards. I hit a Fairy Tale Snow, which is pretty nice for extension, but just this Trudeau should be enough. I go for the End Punisher here, and then Battle Phase, pump up to 8k, I take over the Phantom, 8k battle damage, GG. And this is how you could destroy Yubel going second against the top 700 global. And here we are in the final replay of this episode. So I had to go second again, and currently I have only Tearlaments engine in my hand. My opponent is on Voiceless Voice. Let's see how Tearlaments can beat Voiceless Voice with only engine cards in the hand. Diviner into Tiaras, then low, placing the barrier. And then Barrier, adding Zafira. Zafira, dump the prayers, add the Skull Guardian. And then Zafira, Ritual summon the Skull Guardian, tributing the low. And then Skull Guardian 1, a low 2. Searching the Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Ring. Interesting decision to play this in the main deck without Temper in the format and to summon this one over Zaravis. But my opponent could be scared of decks with many board breakers. And currently I have 2 spells in my hand. Let's see which one my opponent decides to negate with the Odd Eyes. I start with the Scream chaining 1, then Reinhardt chaining 2, trying to chain block against the Odd Eyes. I hit only the Huffness here, and my opponent decides to not negate the Huffness with the Skull Guardian. Yeah, my opponent has Veiler on Kid Carlos, and with Veiler on Kid Carlos, I think you can allow the Huffness into Kid Carlos. But I have Foolish Burial for extension. And now Foolish can send the Reinhardt. My opponent also decided to allow that. That means I resolved all the spells in my hand against one spell negator on the opponent's side, but also, from the opponent's perspective, I have 3 unknown cards in the hand. And if one of them is talents, then my opponent could get cooked pretty hard if one of those cards is talents. So Sharon here, discarding the Clown, and then Clown is 1 additional body. I also take the burn damage, and I also want to decrease my own life points as much as possible because of the End Punisher. My opponent decides to negate the SP Little Knight with the Skull Guardian, and I'm completely fine with that, because I have still Redoer into Kaleido Heart to force out the last remaining back row. But then my opponent goes for Radiance, and now I have only this Trudeau left. But I'm pretty happy with this position because now I can just OTK the opponent with End Punisher. So Prime Madonna here, I take burn damage from the Odd Eyes, which actually benefits me. So adding back the Zafira here. And then sending a Sharon, and now Sharon can fusion summon because I haven't used the Sharon yet. I go into Kaleido Heart, which removes the follow-up from my opponent. And also if I get nipped at this position, then getting nipped on Kaleido Heart is perfectly fine for me. And now I go into End Punisher. And I figured out if I use the End Punisher banish, it should be exactly lethal if I attack the Odd Eyes. But if I made a miscalculation, I could still lose, so I just attacked over the Skull Guardian, and then it's game. 8650 battle damage. Bam! Voiceless Voice destroyed with only Tearlaments engine against top 700 global. And before I finish this video, I just want to showcase you the profile of the Viking opponent that we played in this episode. Top 100 World Championship qualifier. So Tearlaments versus top 100 global, no problem at all. Easy clap, Tearlaments strongest. So all of those players from this episode are not just some random bots. Those are the top players in the Master Duel community. And currently 617 global, so top 700. And if you want to know which ranking I finished in Duelist Cup, check out my next video. Until the next episode, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, that helps my channel a lot. Anyways, see you in the next video, have a nice day, bye!